Hello, I'm Robert, fact-checking for Doomsday Debunked on Facebook, where we help people who are scared of various things. And so if you're scared, hopefully this group will help you. And if you're a fact-checker, then we welcome fact-checkers who can come along and help look at these things. So this time it's about the Doomsday Clock. And you may have seen, this is my... I'll explain how all this fits in a minute. First, let's look at the clock, and let's look at the clock as the BBC had it. And this is a complete misunderstanding of what it's all about, or most likely, actually exaggeration, just clickbait. It says here, symbolic clock, which indicates how close our planet is to complete annihilation. It's now only 100 seconds away from midnight. It's absolutely appalling. If you think about some of the scared people that I help and how they might think, and I've been getting so many PMs from people saying, what does this mean? Is the world about to end, basically? And people do take this literally, and then here's the BBC actually telling them that it's only 100 seconds away from complete annihilation. There's nothing in the actual thing about annihilation of anything. Now this is how they used to report it. This is how the BBC reported it in 2007. And look how much it's changed. Doomsday Clock in quotes. Still talking about nuclear annihilation, but it's not. It doesn't say complete annihilation of the entire planet. So it's changed so much since then. And back then it was 5 minutes before midnight. Now they've set it to 100 seconds before midnight. I don't see that it's got worse since then in that way. Not for the sort of things they're talking about. And so much positive has happened. So back then they added climate change for the first time in 2007. That was the main reason for moving it back to 5 minutes. Well, look at what's happened. Here's just some of the things. We've had the Paris Agreement since then. In 2000, that was 2007. So 2015, the Paris Agreement. Just this year, then last year, the EU sets the carbon zero target for 2050, and the UK did. Finland is zero emissions for 2035. But just as a result of the Paris Agreement in 2015, so that's a big change since then. Then our projection for 2100 is reduced by over a degree. Even though it's very wide range as to what it actually means, but the reduction in carbon dioxide has certainly reduced it by something of the order of a degree from wherever it was to wherever it is now, and probably more. And then look at since 2015. Well, since 2007 certainly, and that's 11 years. In the last 8 years, solar panel prices have reduced fourfold, and they're now competitive with the least cost solar. And battery prices since 2007, they're a tenth of the price that they were back then. That's why we begin to have affordable electric cars. And these are just the beginning. As I say, sprouts for future growth. If the EU can go carbon zero by 2050, then it's certainly possible that the entire world does. And as we increase our reductions, increase our pledges in 2020, 2025, 2030. So I talk a little bit about that here. This is just me. Let's get me off the screen for a moment so you can see it. So I just sketch these in by hand, the dotted lines there. So they're just me drawing dotted lines to give an idea. You can see these are the emissions, including Europe, including the United States, which is decreasing emissions. And not everyone knows that. The total Americas are decreasing. At the Middle East, it's still decreasing. At Africa as well. And our CO2 emissions are decreasing, and they peaked sometime for a few years back. It's only when you add India and China, you start seeing that the emissions are increasing. Then if you add international transport as well. So when people say that nothing is happening, look at all that stuff's happening. All those places have been reducing emissions, and some quite steeply. And that's all, an awful lot of that is a result of the Paris Agreement, the most recent emission reductions. So, no, there's and yes, it's true, it's increasing at the moment very slightly, but it would be increasing an awful lot more if it weren't for all those reductions, which have been going on since before the Paris Agreement, and that really brought things together. So we're going to step up on that. So how they can go and say that that we're now 100 seconds, and back then they said 5 minutes, and now they're saying 100 seconds, and part of that is climate change. That's their reason for moving it back to 100 seconds. But so much has happened. That's positive. And there's this psychologist here. You could have listened to her, Espen Stokes. He's a psychologist, and he talks about he says to step away from doomsday narratives and learn how to make caring for the earth feel personable, doable and empowering. And that's what he's saying. He says focus on positive messages, focus on things that are actually happening and going on. And these people just haven't heard this, which apparently is kind of pretty basic, pretty standard. It's not controversial. It's just pretty mainstream psychology that is the way to do these things. And yet you go and listen to the UN, the leaders of the UN, the atomic scientists, and just go through gloom, 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 more gloom, gloom, steeper gloom, things are getting worse, things are getting worse, things are getting even worse, we've got to act and nobody's doing anything, we've got to do more and nobody's doing anything, we've got to do even more and still nobody's doing anything, and that just leaves people to be hopeless and say, well, if nobody's doing anything, how can we do anything? You need to motivate people by telling them that yes, people are doing things and more is going on and there's lots that has to be done. We are very social creatures. Let's move me back on the screen. We are very social creatures, and if you tell human beings that nobody is doing anything, then they despair. They don't start. Very few people are like Greta and start and say, oh well, we must do something. If you start telling people things are hopeless and even more hopeless and even gloomier and they're more pessimistic than you imagine, that things are getting worse and still nobody's doing anything and still nobody's doing anything and 2 years later nobody's doing anything, then people just give up and get despaired and get suicidal if they're vulnerable. But if you tell them all the positive things that are happening, and I've got to, I'm not even touching on the so positive. Here's my list of positive things and just videos of good things happening in the world. So I'll put this link here. And this is how you motivate people. Here are all these videos of all the good things happening around the world. Dozens of things are going on. Huge projects. Reforestation, reversing desertification, electric planes, new ways of doing fuel, new ways restoring biodiversity in the Amazon, new ways of doing agriculture in Brazil, which help restore the rainforest. There's so much going on in the world, and this is just not mentioned. They haven't mentioned, in that Doomsday Clock, they have not mentioned a single one of any of those things. They just don't have a clue, according in terms of psychology. I'm very surprised that they just don't seem to have a clue as to how to motivate people. And so, yeah, say, and then this is my thing, as I said in an earlier article. In fact, I might just read this out. It's so sad when people think they can't have children because of climate change. 2 years ago, most of these parents weren't despairing. They didn't even give it a thought. Climate change was not an election issue in the US elections in 2016 or the UK elections in 2017 even. Now it's one of the top issues for most governments worldwide. This gives so much more hope for the future for those who've been following it all along, but many of those who've just begun to give it serious attention for a couple of years are already despairing only 3 years after the Paris Agreement that was written in 2018. It's all topsy-turvy. The underlying situation hasn't changed significantly. Scientists knew all of this in less detail decades ago. Back in the 20s, we are following pretty closely the climate projections of the 1970s. The scientists knew it back then. And the politicians not long after with Margaret Thatcher's speech to the UN. We start to do something about it in a serious way, and for the first time, many people feel like giving up. Meanwhile, people are living longer, and our population is levelling off due to prosperity, not scarcity. Literacy is increasing, food security increasing. We have large food reserves. We have a new $1 billion a year fund to prevent famines before they happen. Child mortality going down, greatly reduced poverty. Access to clean water increasing. Things improving in so many ways, and with roadmaps for the future, we know that we continue to do this. It just needs the political will. And so, they should be saying stuff like that. And then there was some other. It was quite strange. It was quite strange. There are quite a number of kind of comments I have actually on this. So they went on about. So first of all, I just want to make clear. And so this was my idea. Just to explain my idea, I just thought you'd have a sprout and you had more leaves. And if there's lots of things going on in that year, you'd have say 10 leaves. And if there's not very much going on, you'd have 2 years leaves. And so, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaves, but that's very arbitrary. There's many other positive things going on. But so it's very subjective. But so is the Doomsday Clock. There's no methodology to it, none at all. It's just a media event, and it's not a clock. It's not about doomsday. It's not a time. The 100 seconds is just to grab headlines and get attention. There's no reason to make it 20 seconds less. They could have made it 5 seconds less. They could have made it a minute more. They could have made it all the way back to 4 minutes. And, there's nothing that you can look up. No list of criteria. There's nothing that can tell you it should be 100 seconds rather than half an hour. It's literally, there's no methodology to it at all. It's just hyperbole. It's just a group of scientists meeting together and deciding how should we make our expression of hyperbole this year. And they're trying to get the attention of politicians and get things over to them. And there are quite a few strange things in this, I thought. So they focused on North Korea, Iran, and the treaties such as New START and the INF. But if they're talking about the world situation, the Iran is local to the Middle East, and it's certainly a long way away from what it was when I was young, when it was about nuclear war and global nuclear war. It's not really about that at all anymore. In fact, there was nothing in it. In the entire announcement, there was nothing regarding to risk of nuclear war, of global nuclear war. I suppose you could say the treaties are sort of, but they were really focused much more. North Korea is never going to start a nuclear war with the United States. It's developing nuclear weapons as deterrent in case the United States invades North Korea. The only risk would be a mistake, which is very unlikely if we keep communications. And certainly China and Russia would not join North Korea with its unreliable nuclear weapons and join in with it against the United States. And they don't want to have a war with the United States. No way. Our world is so connected together. You just look at the effect of the trade war with China, with the United States, and the effect that had on the Asian economy. And an awful lot of the reason for the Hong Kong riots was to do with the China-United States trade war. But trade war is nothing compared with the effect on the Chinese economy of an actual war. There's no way that China wants an actual war with the United States, or anyone, and nor does Russia. It's all just defence. And so, what about this whole thing about giving up of New START and the INF? Well, with the INF, people made a big fuss about giving up the INF, but now we're no longer in it. But Russia isn't rushing out to build lots of new INF breaching weapons. The United States isn't, and Europe isn't letting the United States. Nothing has happened, basically. And the US is making various threats and saying it's going to, but it's, the US is making various, not threats, making various rumours of programs it's looking into. It's doing research into them. It hasn't actually got far as doing very much. They might start stationing some things near to China, but it's not very clear why they're doing it, because they've got nuclear weapons on submarines, and they can go as close to China with those, so why would they bother to have them in South Korea or somewhere on the land within INF range of China? So it doesn't really make too much sense, I don't think. China is not much of a nuclear threat. Anyway, I'll talk about that in a bit. So now this whole New START thing is very, very weird. So Iran can't start a nuclear war because it hasn't got nuclear weapons, and Iran doesn't really want nuclear weapons. Because it knows Saudi Arabia would gain them, and Saudi Arabia could get them easily, but it doesn't want them, because Saudi Arabia is actually, it's certainly supported the Treaty for Complete Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, which was signed by many states in 2017, apart from the nuclear weapon states, and many were certainly interested in it, and a fair few have signed and ratified it. Not big. I could bring it up. I won't talk about that just now, but I would have to bring it up. But the do I give a link to it? No. Shall I just bring up the 217? Treaty on the prohibition, not elimination. So these Wikipedia is good for this sort of thing, so no problem showing it to you. So there are not so many people who actually signed it, but you can see it, and these ones who've actually ratified it. So you can see like South Africa and Mexico, a few countries have ratified it, and New Zealand, of course. But there was an awful lot of countries that were interested in it, and Saudi Arabia was one of those that was interested, even though it hasn't signed it. It wants to, but ideally that's what Saudi Arabia wants, but it wants to be, it's understandably, it wants to be able to deal with the situation if Iran gets the nuclear weapons. So, certainly nuclear weapons are not desired. Most countries that could build nuclear weapons don't desire them. And you get the impression that in nuclear weapon countries everyone wants to have nuclear weapons, but most people don't. Most countries not only don't want it themselves, they don't want any of them in the world. And those certain issues there, we've got South Africa, Mexico, New Zealand, and a number of other countries have signed this and ratified this treaty, which if everyone ratified it, would lead to complete elimination of all nuclear weapons. And so then the worst case is that is not really a new as the worst is the worst case would be new arms race in 2020, not now. But that's not even really, because the New START lasts until 2020. So the main thing they were talking about, New START, loss of the treaties, that's not going to happen until 2020. And if Trump manages to renew it, or if the next president renews it, it's not going to happen at all. But even if the treaty did end, it's not going to be like the Cold War arms race, because Russia is much smaller than the Soviet Union, and just doesn't have the economy to build lots of very expensive nuclear weapons. They don't want to do that, and Russia wants to resume the treaty. So it's really Trump to decide. And China, China only have 290 nuclear weapons, And they also keep the nuclear bombs, as I say, they're separate from the missiles, which is the only only of the main nuclear powers to do that. I think Pakistan also does that, but the big powers like Russia and US don't do that. And we don't really know why Trump is letting the New START expire. He claims that he wants China to be in the treaty, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, because Russia and the United States have over 6,000 each. So is he saying that he wants China to get 6,000 weapons, join the treaty, and then reduce with them? I mean, it's understandable China doesn't want to join this, because they haven't got lots of weapons, and to join the New START would give the impression to the world that they are proliferating like the United States and Russia, and they're not. They're just not interested. As I said, most countries don't want nuclear weapons. Only Russia and the US are kind of mad keen on them, or were during the Cold War. And China is sort of in between. It doesn't really want them, but it's got a few. And it's so uninterested in them, it doesn't keep them mated. It just has these 290. So this whole thing about withdrawing from Trump is not Republican. President Reagan was one of the main instigators of nuclear arms reduction. And indeed, in his talks with Gorbachev at one point, they came very close to complete elimination of all nuclear weapons. But sadly, they just didn't quite go the extra mile, and Reagan was very disappointed. So when you hear Trump being sort of gung-ho about nuclear weapons, that's not a Republican thing. It's not like we're pro guns, so we're pro nuclear weapons. It doesn't work like that. So anyway, Russia is not keen to increase nuclear weapons. China's never been interested in having lots of them. So the US might increase a bit, but it doesn't need to. Its main focus is on small countries, and Congress would have to approve a budget increase. So with all that, I don't really see there's a huge risk for an increase of nuclear weapons. So I would somewhat challenge them on that as well. So as I say, it's all totally subjective, and I'm just saying this, just based on. I'm no expert. I'm just saying this based on giving you a different perspective. Really, that's what I'm trying to do. Just to show it's just them, and them very much, I think, focusing on the doom and gloom, and not focusing on the more positive sides of all this. So, and then the last thing was very strange. I didn't understand their last bit. The cyber. I mean, you understand a bit about the cyber warfare being important. They're focusing on it quite a bit now, but they're also focusing on protecting from it. And the US has been as much an aggression on that, and that's been around for ages. I mean, I don't know what's new about this year. The US stopped Iran from having damaged the Iranian centrifuges long ago. Through a virus that they created, and then so they made a big thing about deepfake videos. So these videos, which rather amusingly you get Boris Johnson endorsing Jeremy Corbyn for Prime Minister, and vice versa, Corbyn in endorsing Boris Johnson, saying that he'd be a good Prime Minister. And so none of them said either of those things. It's just all words put in their mouths by. It's just all words put in their mouths by this fake video. But I mean, we've had Photoshop for a long time, and this is not really much different from that, to my mind. I mean, the Photoshop fools people all the time. We get people coming to our group who got fooled by one or another Photoshop thing, but we also know how to counteract that. And you say go to reliable sources. It's if you get something that seems to be a photograph. And so, yeah, I mean, like, I've got this in the thing I'm talking. There was a Photoshop, a pretty clear Photoshop by The Sun, which is a newspaper in the on BBC. I wonder if I can find it up. I'm not got anything too much there. So, where is it? Mustn't bring up the. See if I can bring up the other article. Oh, is it up here somewhere? No. Oh, I know. I'll bring it up in. It's one of my usual articles. I've got to be careful not to bring up anything that's sort of got something private on it. So go to Doomsday Debunked, because this is going up on YouTube. Go to Doomsday Debunked. Debunking Doomsday. And then, yeah, this latest on the coronavirus. I'm just going to show you these fake videos. So this is Photoshop. Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it must be Photoshop. Look at that. I mean, you wouldn't have people just wandering around with this thing. I think that's just a dead body that's been, or supposed dead body that's been photoshopped in, and someone lying on the floor being photoshopped into this one. I mean, it's most likely you wouldn't have people just walking over dead bodies in the street in Wuhan. The Sun is notorious for doing this sort of thing. So we've had that for ages, and you just have to get to know that there are these people, that these sources are not valid. So The Sun is the paper that ran the story that Freddie Starr ate my hamster, and no hamster was harmed in that story. It's one of the most famous. He was a comedian, and he never ate any hamster, and they ran as the headline news front page that he had eaten a hamster. So that's the kind of paper that is showing these photographs to you. So you're just known for that. So anyway, yes, we'll have deep fake videos, and they're already pretty realistic, as long as the person was doing something rather similar, hands moving at the right point and so on. Then it just modify the lips and the face, and to actually say these different words from what they actually said. And I'm sure they get more sophisticated than that as time goes on. But I mean, we've had Photoshop for years. I don't see how that suddenly means that we've got to move it further to the clock, further to midnight. It's not. They said, this might lead to people to a war starting because someone does a deep fake video. I can't see that. I mean, no, you don't get war starting because of Photoshop. And you have intelligence agencies. You have people who know how to check these stories. The United States is not going to go to war because of a deepfake video any more than they would for a Photoshop photo. So anyway, that was my take on it, just to give you a different slant on it. I think we should have moved it. I think they should move it if they're taking account of if they weren't taking account of climate change, it'd be way here somewhere anyway, because or maybe even 10 minutes or something, because we are certainly not closer to nuclear war than we were during the Cold War. And if they're taking account of climate change, then if it was 5 minutes back then I think it should be maybe move it a little bit closer because of nuclear war, but move it further away because of climate change, because the climate change situation has hugely improved since 2007. That would be my take on it. Anyway, I hope this helps some of you. So the main thing is, though, that the Doomsday Clock is not a clock. It's not as I say in here, Doomsday Clock it's not a time, it's not a doomsday, and there's no calculation method. It's just a media event in which scientists get in front of an audience and use this metaphor, which is just arbitrarily chosen. There's no scientific. It's totally subjective, and they say it in order to get the attention of politicians. And I do well support the idea of getting attention of politicians for some of the things that are going on and saying, maybe, saying we should do some things differently. We should act more on climate change. We need to be careful about biodiversity. We need to be careful about nuclear weapons. These are all very important things. I don't think they didn't actually mention biodiversity, come to think of it, and as far as I remember, but they should do it. So I mean, again, that's another part of it, just kind of being very subjective. As far as I know, biodiversity is not included in their list of criteria. I think it should. Anyway, or it shouldn't. And you can't compare. If they say 2 minutes now, you can't compare it with any previous year, because every year they change their criteria. Well, I mean, that's how I see it. And so anyway, and I think if people want to act, then have a listen to this video. It's very interesting, and learn a little bit about what psychologists have discovered about how you motivate people to act. If that is what you want to do, then have a listen to that video, and you might get quite surprised. And I think a few of these climate activists and even like the leader of the UN and people like that, then I think a little bit of this positive psychology would go a long way towards maybe helping people to act more and do more. And even if these people aren't going to do it, then do it for yourself. And have a read of I've done these positive articles to help you to find things to motivate you and see the world in a more positive way, and stop all the doom and gloom and despair, and realise there's actually a huge amount of hope in the world, and there's a great deal we can do.